All right, let's go ahead and get started. We got everybody on. We got this thing recording. We are good to go. Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jesse Randall, and I'm the founder and CEO of Sweater, and we are the hosts of Founder Saga. Thanks for tuning in with us today and being here. Our whole purpose is to open up the venture capital asset class to the public so that everyone can invest the way that venture capitalists do. And we're on a long road for that. So part of our story is creating Founder Saga and helping tell the stories of awesome founders like Colin here that have created fantastic companies. So Colin, thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me. And by the way, big compliments to Sweater and the mission there. I was drawn to it as soon as I saw you guys launched it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Well, as soon as we're live, I'll make sure you're first in line.
Cool.
So why don't we go ahead and just kind of start off with you giving everybody a quick rundown on yourself and on Sheets and Giggles. I don't know that everyone's familiar with your mission or your product line.
Well, I always say if you're not familiar with Sheets and Giggles, that's okay, although I will hold it against you. But we were founded about 3 years ago. We make sustainable bedding, bed sheets out of a material called eucalyptus lyocell, which is a form of cellulosic rayon. And what that means is basically fabric made from wood. And so we actually make our sheets from the wood of eucalyptus trees, and they are softer than cotton. They're more breathable, they're more durable to rips and tears, and they're more moisture wicking. So if you're a hot sleeper, you'll never wake up in a pool of sweat. And they're also, like I mentioned earlier, much more sustainable than cotton sheets, polyester sheets. They don't use any petroleum, they don't use any pesticides, a lot less water, a lot less energy. We also plant a tree for every order. And so that means in 2020, we planted over, I think, close to 40,000 trees. And we were founded 3 years ago, shipped our first box 2 years ago. We now have over 200 different products. And we had our first $1 million month in 2020, which is really exciting from a growth and traction perspective. So just a little bit about the background of the company. And we were also on Good Morning America in November for some national brand recognition, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, there's so many things I want to dive into on all that.
Sure.
It's gonna be a fun conversation. So first of all, I didn't realize you guys had 200 SKUs.
Yeah.
Is this like every bed size and colors and all that kind of stuff?
Exactly. You're talking, twin through split king, 11 different colors, 2 different mattress depths, 13 inches and under, 14 inches to 20 inches, duvet covers, comforters, throw blankets, heavy blankets, pillowcases, obviously. And then we're coming out with a few other product lines too. So, last year we were actually going to expand pretty quickly into other product categories. We were thinking about weighted blankets, pillows, apparel, robes, pajamas, had prototypes for everything. We even toyed around with like mattress covers and mattresses and bed frames. Eventually we do want to build out this long-term suite of sustainable home products and bedding products. But we decided, I think in January of last year, you know what? We're Sheets and Giggles. Let's pull back. We're getting ahead of ourselves. This is only our 2nd year of operation, and let's go deep into the sheets. Let's capture every sale that we can on sheets. And so that was new colors, new sizes, and basically making sure that we weren't leaving any money on the table from our initial customer pool.
Yeah, it's so smart. Going deep like that. I think the temptation to go wide is
really tempting. Yeah, it's really tempting. But we gave it a lot of thought, and it ended up being smarter, I think, to go deep. And then, I think you can be really successful with that. And then you also build your customer list and people who trust you for those eventual other wider product launches. So that was kind of the thinking behind it too. Yeah.
Man, fantastic. Well, I remember, I think I might have mentioned this to you, but I remember seeing your pitch at Denver Startup Week 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Like what, September of 2018, right?
September 25th, 2018. And I remember it was because it was 1 year to the day that I had gotten laid off from my prior job. So yeah. September 25th, 2018.
That's awesome. The date. Yeah, I remember watching, I don't know if there's anyone else that will see this that also pitched that year. So I'm sorry if you don't see this, but I remember watching probably 5 pitches in a row. I think it was like the second day that you guys have been pitching, second or third day. And I just remember you getting up there and being like, that guy that guy knows what he's doing. I still remember thinking that. I was like, if there's anyone that's going to win this that I've seen, it's him. So I was really stoked. I wasn't able to be there the whole week, but after the fact, I went and looked up who won, and I was like, yep, I knew it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do. Pitching it, so it's funny. My team, they like to get me on a lot of like podcasts and TV interviews and other stuff, because one of the things I just kind of have a knack for is like that public speaking, and so I love getting in front of a crowd. It's like a drug to me to get that microphone, to have a clicker, and then you put 1,000 people in the Boulder Theater, and I'll have them falling out of their chairs, and and it's great because like Sheets and Giggles is like a funny brand, so it gives me a lot to work with from a pitch perspective. But also, and I remember I strategized this with Techstars a couple of years ago when I was doing demo day with Techstars. We didn't want to lean too heavy into the funny, because we also wanted people to walk away with the like exactly what you just said, which is like, this guy knows his sheet, knows his shit. But like, this guy knows what he's talking about. And so it's also a fun tightrope to walk, where it's like fun, but also like, like, holy shit, like this is a really serious, cool thing. Like, and so it's a fun tightrope to walk.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you're good at it. I agree.
Thanks.
It is kind of like a fine line there that you can cross, but you guys have done a great job.
Thanks.
All right, so
let's
jump back in time and go back to the beginning. All right, so where did this idea even come from? I mean, I mean, the name is fantastic, super catchy, very memorable, but you got to have a product as much as a brand. So, I mean, where did this come from?
Well, yeah. So there's 2 or 3 answers to that question. First and foremost, like my background is all over the place. I worked at the world's largest hedge fund called Bridgewater Associates. I got fired in 5 months, became a recruiter, tech recruiter. I left that job and joined a startup in Seattle a year later, selling B2B software, app virtualization. I was like 24 at the time. Ended up leaving that job, going to an opportunity with Techstars in 2015 with a company that I was on the founding team of, and that was a wearable technology company. And that was my first foray into consumer. And I really liked that. And that was something that I thought was like a really totally different path than anything I've been on before. So I spent about 2.5 years doing consumer. I did retail deals with Target, Brookstone, Best Buy, pretty much everybody under the sun for this piece of wearable tech. And then I ended up getting laid off at 1 p.m. on a Monday, along with all my friends from that job, which really sucked. And I think that when you get laid off, on a Monday, first thing you do is you go get tanked. So we went to the Mexican restaurant across the street and ordered a bunch of margaritas and went out to the Rockies game that night. And I kept telling my friends I had this idea for a betting company, Sheets and Giggles. And they were like, okay. And so I think that the original where it came from was actually, I was so frustrated with some aspects of the business model at this last company that I wanted to completely rework them, but I couldn't rework the margins. I couldn't rework the go-to-market strategy that bet was made. I couldn't rework the distribution or the functionality or the market that we were in. And so having, done that and been VP of business development there, I basically took all the lessons I learned and I wrote down my perfect business model. I wanted a massive commodities market, highly fragmented, no leader I had to chip away at, largely traditionally physical retail, so I could help bring it online with a direct to consumer model. And then I also wanted something that was a very flat, boring brand space with no loyalty or switching costs. And I really wanted something that I could do a sustainability mission for. And then I preferably wanted something that was, like I said, in a flat brand space, but also a boring brand space, so I could kind of zig where everybody else is zagging. And I also didn't want any Bluetooth firmware software. Wanted a pretty simple product. And this is a true story. I looked at all the domains that I owned, because I buy a lot of domains for fun. And I owned sheetsgiggles.com. And I thought, does betting fit my criteria? And it fit it perfectly. It's $12 billion market, growing 10% year over year. Top 5 players only owned about 27% of the space. It was just like, it was calling my name from like this brand, differentiation perspective, where I could just be this totally out there, bizarre brand in a very like sterile white walls type of space. And so that was definitely something that I gravitated towards and decided to incorporate 3 weeks after I got laid off.
That is fantastic.
So okay, yeah, business model first.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. I think there's something really to learn from that, right? And that you don't, like, how do I want to say that? Sort of like you can engineer your way into an opportunity if you're
Yeah, I
smart
mean,
to look at the
yeah.
right variables.
Well, I think it's like a lot of founders will do this, the founder's journey, which is like, I have a problem, I built a solution, and now I'm going to market the solution. And like a lot of times that can be really cool and interesting because it's, something that's very personal to them and potentially personal to other people. So it could be a lightning rod. And sometimes, but a lot of times it's just like not as big as a problem as they envisioned, or it's not as marketable, or
Mhm.
more insidiously, it is marketable, but not the retail price you need to make a profit and actually build a company. And so I think that what I've really learned over the years of watching, and I've been through Techstars twice. I've watched a lot of people start companies, and I'm still learning. Like I'm not like the end all be all of any of this stuff,
Of
but
course.
I think what I've learned is that a lot of people should really start with the business model and financial model first and foremost. And then if that is telling them that it's a compelling opportunity, then they can spend all the time in the world going out and building their ideal product for that business model. But not until they validated that business model first. I don't think people do that enough.
Yeah. Well, as a finance guy, I mean, I'll be the first to say that unit economics, especially in physical products, I mean, it's absolutely paramount. You can't get around it,
Yeah, can't.
you know, or
Yeah.
especially and in direct consumer. I mean, you've got so many other costs you got to absorb. Um, you know that story.
Yeah, I meet every week with my CFO, who's great. So, but yeah, I mean, it's and the thing is like some people, what you really just want is you want a business that scales well. Like, and I think that that's
Mm,
the thing that I've really enjoyed about S&G is that we scale really well. Like our contribution margin's healthy. It's just a matter of like, at what point do you make certain decisions to like, go bigger, or like stay more controlled, or like, add
mhm.
more product lines, add more people. Like, so these are all things we're going through now as we enter our fourth year of operations. Got a couple hundred SKUs, got 7 people on the team, hitting an 8-figure run rate, and like, figuring out like uh, where we go from here. And I think it's exciting, but it's also very challenging to answer these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to back up just a little bit. I
Sure.
mean, you talked a lot about sort of, I mean, I guess I'm calling it engineering your opportunity, right? And
Hmm.
you found a good position in the space and a good brand, a good opportunity, but you still got to create a good product. So, so after you figure this out and you set up the company, you have to go create this thing. Yeah. So show us the product. Like
So it's the
how
best.
did you
So
come to eucalyptus bed sheets? I mean,
yeah, so this is our lavender, by the way. I love it. I'm obsessed with this color. It's so pretty. So basically, what I really wanted to do was a sustainable product, but not just sustainable, but it had to be exceptional. It had to be better than cotton. And basically, my goal was I didn't want to ask people to try something new if I wasn't reliably going to say it's also better. And so I looked at bamboo viscose. I looked at modal. I looked at a few, hemp and linen. And basically, I just met with different manufacturers. I met with some brokers. I had the guys at Shinesty and Boulder mentor me on textiles and textile production. I got some introductions to some other people who have a lot more experience than I do in the textile space. And I went at this totally green. I had zero experience with fabrics or textiles. And I basically just learned what was important in a fabric and how they were produced, and who I had to meet with to get them produced. And I met with, I think, like probably 6 or 7 manufacturers before I decided on the people that we would go with. And they're based in India. They're wonderful people. And we, sent them our first order, I think in March 2018. So almost 3 years ago now, which is really hard to believe. And I had to uh, guarantee a like $250,000 purchase order. I didn't have $250,000.
I was going to ask you about
So, so,
that.
so that was probably the riskiest, scariest thing I ever did with the business. And, I had to wire them 10% down, so it was initial 10% deposit, and that was, like it never gets easier to wire. Now the wires just keep getting bigger, but it never gets easier to wire that type of money to people. And so, yeah, it was just really. But the thing is, I didn't do that until you want to talk about finance and numbers. I didn't wire that money. I didn't place that purchase order until I had already gathered, I think, like 7 or 8,000 emails from interested people ahead of our crowdfunding launch. So I had already validated that people wanted this. You can do some simple math on your email list for conversion purposes, figure out the way your crowdfunding campaign is going to go and what those numbers are going to look like, and feel pretty confident in that first initial PO. But yeah, it was definitely the product piece was my biggest weakness because I had never done this before, and so I had to surround myself with mentors and people that could help me get through our initial production run.
Yeah, let's dive into that because that's something that's extraordinarily important, right? You choose to go into an industry like this that you had no real experience in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So surrounding yourself by others is paramount. So you make
Yeah.
fewer mistakes. I mean, you could do it, right? But you're just going to step in a lot of potholes.
I mean, you still will.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say my director of product, Mike. He was, I flew out to Los Angeles to meet him all the way back in, I think, like January 2018. Had a coffee with him. He was working at another company. I got introduced to him via a guy in Denver who's a t-shirt company that he has, and he said, "You got to talk to my buddy Mike." So I flew out to LA, got a coffee with him. I said, "Hey, look," and this is like, me being a 27-year-old kid at the time who, had just gone through Techstars a couple of times. It's a very natural question for me to just ask, like, would you be willing to be a mentor of mine? Like, like as I do this, like, and Mike was like, "Does that come with like a monthly retainer?" And I was like, I mean, it can. And so he became a mentor of mine first, which is, I just said, "Hey, I'll call you occasionally. I have some questions that you're asking here and there." He didn't seem to mind it. We enjoyed talking to each other. And then I hired him in October 2018 to be my director of product and director of operations. And so he has 40 years experience in textile supply chain and manufacturing. And he's been absolutely wonderful over the last, 2.5 years to work with. Beyond that, it's you piece together with a bunch of contractors, brokers, freight forwarders. Our manufacturing team in India is wonderful. Avinash, Manish, Amit, the whole crew over there. I'd say about 40 people total touch the sheets in the production, and getting them over to the warehouse in the US and shipping them out. And so we've got warehouses in Fort Lauderdale and Los Angeles, opening up another one in Utah. It's just great to have all the pieces now that we're a few years in, because the figuring out the first piece is definitely like the most challenging, because you're starting for the total blank slate. You gotta make it out of thin air.
Yeah, that's right. So you officially brought him on as your chief product officer after you did your crowdfunding campaign and after startup week, right?
Yeah. Yeah. October 2018. So just after startup week. Yeah. So he was mentoring me. I was using a third party at the time to help with the initial production run. And then we were also, working with our manufacturers on a daily basis. I flew out to India in June of 2018 and spent a couple weeks out there on site, and that was really great. And we have multiple manufacturing partners, not just the one. So
gotcha. So one of the things that I like to paint a realistic picture of is how long some of this process can take, right? So from the time you started, let's just call it early 2018, until you got your first real revenue, how long did it take for you to really have any cash in the bank?
Well, that's a good question, because I kind of I took a while and I speed ran at the same time. So I founded in October 2017, didn't do anything for like a few months, in the sense of like, I just built the website, got a logo made, just like, built business model, financial model, stuff that didn't cost any money, early content, stuff like that. Then January 2nd, 2018, I really put my head down and started working every day. February 2018, we did our first photo shoot, hired our crowdfunding agency. We launched our first website in January that year too. We started gathering emails March 2018, gathered 10,000, 11,000 emails in 2 months ahead of launch on May 1st, 2018. And then we launched on Indiegogo on May 1st. So it took about 4 months of every day, 18-hour days, 7 days a week work. Launched Indiegogo, did a $300,000 crowdfunding campaign, which was the biggest ever for the bedding category on Indiegogo. And it sounds funny, like biggest ever for the bedding category, right? But there were actually 2 other bedding companies that launched the same day as us, and one made 15,000 and one made 50,000, and we made 284,000. So that was a big flag for me that we were doing something right with the brand voice differentiation and the preparation. And we made $45,000 on day one. Indiegogo deposits your first check a month after you launch. So June 1st, we got our first deposit. And then we started doing pre-orders on July 1st. And our revenues in 2018 went something like, I don't know, it was like, I can't even remember. I'm like blanking out. It was like 30, like July was like 30 grand in pre-orders. August was like 30 grand. September was 20 grand. Then it started to pick up. October was like 70. November was 90. December was like, 75 grand. And I remember November 2018, and it's cool to go from, 10X in a couple of years. But I remember in November 2018, the first ever big sales day was Purple Friday. And we did that the week before Black Friday. And I did it tongue in cheek in a sense of like, I was like, I want to be with my family. You guys should be with your family too. Don't bother us over Thanksgiving weekend. Buy your stuff the week early. And it was November 16th, 2018. And we did $22,000 in a day in sales. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is a real company. I was like, we could do this. Like we could really build something cool out of this. And then now 2 years later, Purple Friday grossed over $250,000 in a day this year, which is like, and I'm happy to share that. It's crazy. I can't believe it. I'm saying it. I expect there to be like an audience reaction or whatever, but it was just like, just totally shocking, blew me away. And like, it's just a lot of fun to see that growth trajectory. And, that's what 10X looks like, like it's crazy. So.
Oh, it's awesome. Well,
yeah,
I mean, it goes without saying, congrats, because that's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's so hard to, I mean, to have this experience at all, right? I could count a dozen founders I know who would wish that they were in your shoes, with their product.
It's surreal. Yeah, it's surreal. It's definitely, I don't want to say a dream come true because that's too trite, but it's, pun intended, it really has been. And so, I don't take it for granted. Like I pinch myself all the time. And, we're still a long way from what I would consider success. It's just like, milestones on milestones, and it's important to celebrate those. But yeah, I mean, if you had told me 2 years ago, I was alone in the warehouse at 10 p.m. packing boxes by myself in December of 2018. And if you'd told me less than 2 years after that, we would have done, $250,000 in a day, like I would have taken that any day of the week. And it's just very humbling sometimes to see the brand reach. So it's cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So in all this time, have you sought outside investment? Have you been able to bootstrap this thing? What's that equation look like for you?
Oh, a little bit of both. Sorry, it's my dog Harvey.
Harvey,
what's up, man? So he's got his own webpage too. If you go to sheetsgiggles.com/Harvey, he's got his own webpage. Yeah,
I'm gonna do that.
He doesn't know who I'm talking to. He's like, there's nobody else here. But yeah, so mostly revenue funded. I would say about, quick back of the napkin, like 80-90% revenue funded. And we have raised a couple $1,000,000 over the last 2.5 years. And that's been really great for growth capital and dry powder and being able to experiment and screw things up. And, like, oh, shouldn't have done that direct mail campaign, or, air freight during the holidays is very expensive. So we've definitely made some mistakes along the way and been able to experiment with that capital. And so we have done Techstars. It's public that we raised a $1.25 million seed round in June of 20 or July of 2019. So we haven't raised any money in the last year and a half. And so it's been almost entirely revenue driven.
Gotcha. So if you don't mind, like diving in on that with me, like looking at direct consumer products.
Yeah.
What would you say is the ideal equation for financing the company? I mean, obviously, even with high growth, right? It's hard to feed the machine with the cycle that you have. So what's the ideal mix of, equity and, debt funded stuff and using your own cash. I mean,
Well, we're
tough
going
question.
heavy. We're going heavier into the debt funded stuff now. So we're currently exploring different debt financing options, and we have a few offers on the table that I think are interesting. I think that it's probably, if you, my answer would be, if you can get debt financing, which very few companies can early on. There are more options now, right? There's like, Shopify Capital and Clearbank and other tech startups that are funding other startups, which is awesome. But if you can get debt financing for inventory specifically, I would do that over equity, because you can usually secure some type of debt against that inventory. And I think that it's a much better form of financing in the long run and they both have their place. I think equity as more of growth capital. So if I want to try some aggressive marketing campaigns, if I want to try to, hire a bunch of new people and build my team, and that's the growth capital that I want to use for that. The debt side of things, I think, is much more useful for inventory financing. And so that would be the mix for me. I don't know exactly how much, everybody needs and what the percentage breakdown should be between those two things. But I think that I like to raise money based off of goals. So I raised 1.25 million bucks a year and a half ago or more. And the goal of that round was, hey, here's our current trajectory. I would like to double or triple it. Here's how I think that we can do that with this money. And I think that pitch is always much more compelling than, I have this idea, give me money, is when you're on that trajectory already. And so, for direct to consumer specifically, I don't know. I think there's a time and a place to raise money. I don't think it's early and at high valuations. I think that the industry kind of got away from itself a little bit over the last few years. And now, you read all the articles about like D2C reckoning and like all the consumer brands that are blowing up and stuff, and people who have raised these like huge outsized valuations that don't need them or deserve them. And I agree with all those takes on the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just reading an article this morning about how D2C companies are kind of snubbing their noses a little bit at venture capital money these days. And there's a variety of reasons, right? I mean, maybe it's because they looked at, IPOs like, that have been out there that maybe didn't do so good. I'll just leave it unnamed, right?
And,
okay, you could say it. Yeah, I mean, like,
there's other ones too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like looking at some of those equations, like, is that the best route to go? And I mean, can you maintain, not you, but like in the industry as a direct to consumer company, can you maintain that kind of growth trajectory long enough to justify bringing in that kind of money? It's an interesting equation.
It is. And I think there's always the possibility that somebody can do it, or that there's a D2C company that'll do it. I think they're just few and far between. And so for me, I like to think about equity as like very, very useful money that can help us grow. And if you set the expectations properly with your investors, then everybody should be really, really happy if you hit your goals and perform well against the expectations. I think that people get into, DC companies snubbing their nose at DC. No, I think it's kind of the other way around. I think that venture got really excited about the space, funded a bunch of companies. They, all started competing for the same people and eyeballs in different industries with very little differentiation, right? There's a bunch of stories that have been written about blands and not brand. I love that, blands instead of brands. Like, and as S&G's grown, I've had to really resist internal pull and external pull on us becoming more of like that mass market bland, which is, I completely agree with that terminology. And it's really hard to stay true to like a differentiated brand over time, because mass market requires some level of conformity. And so I don't know, I think that like VCs now have kind of corrected it a little bit, where they're looking at consumer investments, I think, still as a really viable investment, but they're, I think, a little bit more focused on the KPIs that matter, things like LTVs and contribution margins and return rates and repeat value. And like, I think that those type of KPIs are really driving a lot more of the conversations, and frankly, a lot of consumer companies don't have good metrics. And so they're, and at the same time, like, I do think that from a founder perspective, a lot of people need to be more honest with themselves about what they want and about what they want in their lives and in their company. Is like, do you want to get on the VC treadmill with a consumer company, like you said, where you're always chasing that next growth metric and that next hit and that next margin? Now we have to open up 50 stores in 25 cities across the country, and expand our product lines, the things that we were never even supposed to do in the first place, but that our customers will buy from us for some reason. Like, I think that type of a trajectory is like certainly an interesting one, but I don't think that like a lot of consumer brands actually have that ability to expand like that. So I don't know. I think that a lot of people would be better to build a more controlled company that does one or two things really, really, really well.
That's good. I really like that. So if we go back to like, let's talk about 2019 for a second. So
Yeah,
2018 was a lot of building foundational stuff, validation,
alone in the warehouse type of year. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And 2019 was really about connecting with the consumer, right? And trying to figure out how to make this thing repeatable. So certainly at some point, you probably felt some anxiety along the way around anything. I mean, everything. I don't know. Like like what do you think was the hardest part? I mean, like there's so many moving parts in a business like this.
Everything. I think there's two things that I always struggle with the most. I'm not much of like so like as a CEO, I'm more of a creative manager who likes to kind of just let his people have a lot of autonomy and work really hard and hit their goals, and I push people pretty hard to do that. And so I think managing people has been probably the biggest thing for me, and the thing that gives me the most anxiety is, am I doing a good job? Am I creating a good workplace for people? Because it's funny, you start a company because at some level you don't want to be beholden to anybody else. I was sitting at Techstars last year and I was in a CEO roundtable, and I said, why'd you start a company? I said, not the mission, not the purpose. Why not a charity? Why not a nonprofit? Why like a company? And every single person had some variation of like, I was sick of being told what to do and didn't want to take orders from anybody ever again. And I think that's a really like common thread amongst founders and entrepreneurs. And so what I'm saying there is that like when you hire people, you end up kind of like backing yourself into being beholden to other people, right? Like I am responsible for my team and their lives and their emotions and their difficulties and their asks and the things they need from me. And it's kind of funny because you don't realize when you're not the boss or you're not the CEO, you don't realize the demands that, having a team will pull on you. So I think that's the thing that gives me the most anxiety, is making sure that my people are happy and that I'm giving them the room to do what they think is interesting and fun and challenging. And then two is the customer. The customer always gives me such anxiety. Like I think about it all the time. Like, are people happy? Are people liking their products? Like, oh, they probably hate their products. Like, oh, like, we're probably not doing a good enough job. Like, oh, we should improve this or improve that or change this. And the reviews keep coming in. The reviews every time. I'm almost surprised every time a 5-star review comes in where it's just like a glowing, like, oh my God, these are the best things ever. I'm almost like relieved. And it's like, you'd think after we've gotten like 4,000 reviews and have like a 4.8 star average rating, you'd think that at some point I would like exhale and be like, okay, like, I think it's because I don't have that product background that I still have that really intense imposter syndrome of, like not being able to start a company that builds fantastic products. And so, that's why I put a lot of resources and time into customer service. And I actually still personally respond to every customer on Facebook and Instagram. We had gotten away from that for a while and passed that off to other people on the team. And then I took that back over during the holidays because the volume was too much and I had to help out. And my team asked me to continue doing it because they realized that the brand voice coming from me and that very one-to-one engagement on that comment level that other people will read and attribute to the brand is actually a very powerful conversion tool. So in any case, it's the internal team and the external team. And now the external team, I think we've got like getting close to 100,000 customers, which is really crazy lifetime. So
yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah, it's
like a small city. Not bad.
Yeah, I know, right? I got a little, I got a village. I got a village that we got to take care of, and it freaks me out. And also the bigger you get, the more mass market. My team laments this all the time, and I don't mean this in a bad way. And I probably shouldn't even say this, but like mass market stuff is like kind of like it just gets dumber. Like it gets like it just keeps getting dumb into this like more lowest common denominator thing. And so we have and I don't, maybe I shouldn't say dumb. It's just like it's just my customer service team gets a lot of more mean spirited stuff, and a lot more like, like obvious stuff, and a lot more, a lot of things that like would bother me or whatever. So I have to take care of my CS team and also make sure they're getting their support and R&R and everything else like that too. And we don't outsource any of that. It's all local team members.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. So I've loved talking about this with you. I think that your journey is both unique and impressive. If we could figure out how to
Nice.
replicate your experience for others, it's definitely the way to go. So I want to give you like
neuroticism, anxiety, and probably a pinch of ADD. Yeah.
That also seems to be a common thread among a lot of founders.
Yeah, context switching. Like when I was a recruiter, my favorite part about it was the context switching. I go from a marketing job at a startup to a software engineering role at a bank to, I just jump around like crazy. I think I hired a social media manager at a parking company one time. And so I love that. And I love my recruiter background as well for S&G, so I can hire people, I think, on a better level than some of my founder friends. But yeah, it's I don't know. I often think about like, I think imposter syndrome is the other thing that gives me a ton of anxiety. Like I just don't feel like I should be where I am or whatever that is, and that's a hard thing to like think about a lot. But I just try to close my eyes and enjoy the ride.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give the last few minutes to you, to kind of give you an opportunity to, look in the eyes of aspiring founders that might be looking at a direct consumer product, or those that have any kind of product they're trying to put out there. What do you wish you would have known going into this that would have improved your experience or accelerated the path you went on?
Don't do white packaging.
All right, now wait. Now, there's a story there.
Yeah. In the early going, everybody wants their products to be beautiful and Apple-esque and like clean and like just like really pop. And so I did a white box with purple font. It was just like this, but white. And UPS and FedEx do not care how beautiful your packaging is, and white packaging will get destroyed. So that's thing number one. I think is just a small thing, and I think thing number two is treat other people the way you want to be treated. So I made a reference earlier, and I feel bad saying it. In terms of like the bigger you get, kind of the less intelligent the audience gets. That was just more me vocalizing for my team some of the frustrations they have with people sometimes who aren't the nicest. We actually have a really, like, I think overall, like a really like funny, clever, smart customer base. I think that the brand kind of attracts people. Like we always say, like if you like Seinfeld, you'll like S&G. And that's just me being a Seinfeld elitist. But I think that like treating others the way you want to be treated is really important to the brand and to who we are. And so, we give back as much as we can. We do a lot of donations. We help people out. We bend over backwards to make our customers happy. People say, hey, I have a loose thread, or I've got a hole in my fitted sheet or whatever, or what can you guys do? We'll just replace it, and it ends up resulting in like way higher LTVs, lower return rates, like more loyal customers, great word of mouth. We get a huge percentage of our sales in our survey is just word of mouth from friends and family. And I think it's just the way that like, we pick up the phone whenever somebody calls, we respond to Facebook messages within, 5 or 6 minutes. And I think that is a really important lesson is like, if you hate something when a company does something, don't do it. And if you love something when a company does something to you, then you should replicate it. And that's kind of the way that we've done it from day one. And then I think the third thing is, probably around like hiring and the people that you hire. So I have like two rules with that. One is don't hire assholes, and I because I have for expediency, and you will and they don't work with us anymore, and you will regret it every time that you do that, every single time. And I think that that's just I think that's like the McKinsey rule, right? Like the airplane test. If you want to sit next to the person on an airplane, like if you don't want to work with somebody, but you need a job done, and you're like, yeah, I get a bad vibe about this person, but maybe they'll be okay because they can do the job. Don't hire that person. And then just wait, take the pain, keep looking, and figure it out in the future. And then thing number two is about hiring is that people hire people who are like themselves. And I think that that is actually something that is both a good thing, right? You can and a bad thing. The good thing is that you can hire people that are like your personality or your skill set or what you're looking for in the role. And the bad thing is that, like people who look like me, like white guys, are going to hire other white guys. It's just a subconscious thing that you do, and so you got to be aware of it and recognize it as a weakness and a subconscious bias. And so, but on the positive side of it, it can also be a negative. It's just almost overall a negative because you end up hiring people like you. And for me, that means that I've hired a bunch of people who are like insanely autonomous, hate being micromanaged, load 9 a.m. meetings, and will ask why before they say no. And that drives me crazy. Sometimes I'm just like, I'm the CEO, god damn it, and I want this done and like do it this way. And I always have to pull back and remind myself, like, no, like you hated it when people did that when you were an employee. Like you cannot do that. You hire good people, like let them do good work. And that is something I've had to remind myself of constantly. And that transition from founder to CEO is, I think, an incredibly difficult transition. I've had to get training on it, and I've had to go to CEO coaches for it. And I think that's one thing I've learned is that, trust your hiring and trust the people that you bring on, and don't if you hate micromanaging, they do too. So those are probably the 3 or 4 things I'd say to any inspiring entrepreneur. And then yeah, I mean, I could talk all day about like hours work and work ethic. And I will say one last thing is like, I think a lot of people forget that work is a means to an end and not an end in and of itself. And I've lost myself along the way a few times. I'm notorious for like 18-hour days, 4 a.m. emails, never putting down my phone, missing important moments. And I did last year in 2020, I really took a deep look at myself and asked myself, like, am I accomplishing the goals that I set out to do when building this business? And the answer was no. Like I was a slave to my company. And so I really had to work hard to remind myself that the work will be there in the morning. It will always be there in the morning. And that's something that I think people lose sight of a lot because entrepreneurs are naturally very ambitious people.
Mhm. Great tips. I love the insights there. It's very real, right? When you're building these things.
Yeah, it's intense. Yeah, it's hard. I've done plenty of things I regret, and hopefully somebody can save themselves some heartbreak or something along the way.
Well, thanks again, Colin, for joining us today. Your story is inspiring, and we're grateful that you put a great product out in the market. Makes the world a better place. And one of the things I just want to comment on. I love that you're creating a full circle, sustainable cycle in the way that you're doing your product, right?
Thanks.
And putting that back in. I'm a big advocate of looking at the entire life cycle of your product, and I think that's fantastic. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. So, thanks again for joining us, and everyone that's been on today. Thank you for being a part of this as well. We'll get this thing recorded and up on the website as soon as possible. So, Colin, thanks again for joining us, and everybody else, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. I appreciate it.